All right, the 28th of the month. Here we go. Hayom Yom. 28th of Adar. So these are instructions for Krishma Alamita, and the last one is for those of us who say, or those of you, or anybody who says Tikkun Chatzos. So in the Shema before retiring, Krishma Alamita, so he gives instructions. These instructions are written in the Siddur. Shabbos and festivals, we do not say Ribboni Shalom or Lam Natseach, but we do say them on other days that Tachanin is not said. After the 3 paragraphs of Shema, we add the word Emes, and then Yalzu Hasidim is said only once, and Hin Tosoi, that we say 3 times. Yivarechacho we say 3 times. And in Tikkun Chatzos, we don't say the Lam Natseach, etc. In those days that we don't say Tachanin. Okay, how are we going to apply this? Other than do it halachically correct, which is a pretty good application. But sure. Halacha al tikkun halichos ela halachas, right? Don't read going, read halachas. The goings of the world belong to Hashem. And where do we learn that? From the Torah. So today we're we're second day of exploring. We had spoken about the Maila, the advantage of mitzvahs maisius over the just thinking into things. And yesterday we started, and today we'll go further with the reverse, looking at the Maila, the advantage of Torah, which is something that one learns in one's thought and speech over deed. So we're holding, in this classic Tanya, we're starting on page, Memtes, Memtes, 3rd line down. In lessons in Tanya, we are page 503. Okay? So, Ma'asha Amru, Razal, that which our sages have said, Talmud Torah keneged kulam, right? This is reversing the tables, right? We were talking about mitzvahs maasias, the deeds that one does, particularly yesterday, tzedakah, and the largeness of tzedakah that it really encompasses all the mitzvahs of action. So now, on the other hand, that which our sages have said, Talmud Torah keneged kulam, that the study of Torah equals all of the mitzvahs, which would include tzedakah. Why is this? It's a different perspective. Why? Because Talmud Torah takes place in your mouth and in your thought. And speech and thought, there are 3 garments of the soul, right? Thought, speech, and deed. Deed being the lowest, right? The one on the ground. But the more internal, the deeper levels of these garments are speech and thought. So Talmud Torah takes place in speech and thought, shehem levushim penimim shel nefesh hachiyunos, which are inner garments, deeper garments of the enlivening soul, right? Because we think with our brain and our mouth, which are parts of the animal part of our body, the physical part of our body, which is enlivened by the nefesh hachiyunos, but the speech and thought are deeper parts of the nefesh hachiyunos, of the enlivening soul. And also, the essence of the level of Chabad, of Klippus Noiga, of the Nefesh HaChiyunis, Nichlelis b'Kedusha Mamish, is included in Kedusha Mamish, really, when one occupies oneself with Torah, be'in, in a concentrated way, b'seichel, and with one's intellect. So what are we doing? We're taking the inner garments now of the Nefesh HaChiyunis and bringing them to Kedusha, the deeper parts of the Nefesh HaChiyunis, when we're learning Torah and saying Torah. Even though the essence, the very being and the essence of the midos of the Nefesh HaChiyunis, which is chagas, right, chesed, gevurah, teferes, and then nahi, etc., malchus, even though those garments, which are the midos, a Beinoni is not able to transform them into kedusha. Why not? Because the evil, evil we define as right anything that's not kedusha. It doesn't have to be bad, just not a kedusha. Anything, because the negativity and the strength and the midos of the midos is more powerful than the Chabad. Why? Because the midos get their nourishment, their sucking, literally, from deeper levels of kedusha, as is known to those who know Chaim, the Chochman, the Stores, the hidden wisdoms, Chochman, the Stores. We've talked about this before, that the animal, the power of the animal comes from the breaking of the vessels in Olam HaTohu. Olam HaTohu is a deeper level, a precedent. That precedent implies some time, but that's why I always use the word deeper, more external and deeper levels rather than time. But sometimes people do translate it. It's precedent. It's before the Olam HaTikun. First comes Olam HaTohu, and then the second level of creation is Olam HaTikun. So the midos are sourced higher, and they fell. They fell down. This is a principle of the higher their source, the lower they come. Now, and this is the power of the animal. We've talked about this before. Why does the animal have so much power? Because the animal comes from a much deeper place. But that power also means that it's harder to change them, right? I mean, you could change the way you think, but it's very difficult to change the way you feel. I mean, someone can have a relationship with you, and you're some angry, let's say. And he says, listen, why don't you just think about this? Think about, the good times we've had together. And you say, yeah, I can think about that, but, it's not changing the way I feel at the moment. You hurt me. I can't change the feeling. I mean, eventually, hopefully you can, but we see, in daily life that it's harder to change the way you feel than it is to change the way you think, which is why, one of the reasons why, moyach shalit alalev, one can manipulate one's thoughts, one can grasp thought, particular meditations and contemplations, which will eventually fall and flow down into the midos. And that's why we focus on thought so much in contemplation and meditation in Hasidus. But the problem is that the midos really are much more entrenched and fixated and fixed than thought is. Thought is much more fluid. And the reason being because the midos are drop downs from toihu, where the thought is something from tikkun. This is known liyudei schein. This is known to those who know, as now we now know. Now, zois oid acheres. Now, there's another reason. The Alter Rebbe adds why it's so difficult. There's another reason why Talmud Torah has an advantage over mitzvahs. Right. The first one being because you're dealing with the inner garments, right? Thought and speech. The second reason is this. Another reason why Talmud Torah is, as we say, Talmud Torah keneged kulam, the study of Torah encompasses all of the mitzvahs, including the mitzvah tzedakah. And that's because vehiha oila al kulanu, and this perspective, this aspect of the advantage of Torah over mitzvahs is an advantage which is ha'oila al kulanu, which rises above all the others, meaning it's the most important reason. And the reason is because b'mailas oisik Talmud Torah al kol. First of all, the reason why Talmud Torah, that oisik Torah, Talmud Torah rises over all the mitzvahs, as this will be understood al pima shekasav le'il, what the Alter Rebbe wrote above, B'Shem HaTikunim, in the name of that part of the Zohar called the Tikunim. What did he write? The Ramach Pikudim, the 248 mitzvahs, in Ramach Evre de Malka. They are the 248 limbs of the king. So that metaphor, let's look at that metaphor as it applies limbs. God doesn't have limbs, but look at it from the perspective of Adam down here below. If he expresses him, if the expression of God upstairs is called Adam HaElyon, the supernal man, so let's look at the lower man down here below, the Adam HaTachton, there by way of a mashal. So, Ein orech b'dimyon klal ben hachayis sheberamach edvorov. There's no comparison at all between the quality of the life force, I put in the word quality, between the life force of the 248 limbs, in relation to the chayas, the vitality of the brain. Not only is the brain is much more refined in terms of its chayas, but the brain is the controller, is the central control system of everything. So there's more refinement, and there's more delicacy, and there's more, and that's its advantage over the limbs. The power of life invested in the brain is a much more refined, sensitive, deeper power than is invested in the limbs. Where the brain is haseichel, which is intellect, amischalik legimel bechinas, which that seichel is divided to three, which is chokmah bina das. So that's the way it is down here below. That the brain chayas is a much more refined, sensitive chayas than the life force in the limbs. So kochamam is so similarly derech mashal. We're going back upstairs to the Adam HaElyon, to the supernal man. Lahadul v'varbas abdolis le'en kates, which we first say that we have to make a division of tens of thousands of levels between Adam down here below and the Adam above. But in the Adam above, there is a energy, which we'll call the brain energy of the Adam HaElyon, of the supernal man, and that is the Ha'oris or Ein Sof Baruch Hu, the ray, the radiation, the flow of light, of which is the Or Ein Sof Baruch Hu, the light of the infinite one, blessed be He. Hamislapshus b'mitzvas masius, which that refined light from the so-called brain of God is what's invested in the mitzvahs masius. So that's a much more refined light. So the light which is in the limbs is much less refined and not as deep. Its source isn't as deep as the light which is in the Ensa from Lubitsch, the other way around. That the light up from the brain is much more refined than the light hamislabeshes b'mitzvahs masius, than the light which is enclosed in physical deeds. When you compare the life force that's in the physical deed of the mitzvah, that's like the life force in the hand or the finger, versus the more refined, deep, and more all-encompassing, because even the movement of the hand comes from the brain, more all-encompassing than the light which is in the brain, which is Chabad. And that light in the brain of God, the light force that's in the brain of God, where will you find that? In the Torah. The Torah is Achmasa Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the wisdom of the Holy One, blessed be He. So that wisdom is called Lechabad Shebetoira. And and every person grasps and has an entry point into that refined, fine light, each one according to their own abilities. Even though the way we understand Torah is because we're physical, we understand it through physical things. That's why Shlomo HaMelech wrote a book called Mishlei, right? It's all about metaphors, because that's the only way we can relate, because we can, like Eve said, from my flesh, I can see godliness, but my flesh is just a metaphor for godliness. So all of the Torah that we masi, that we understand, comes through our physical vessels. But the Torah, where it comes from, is not the physical, obviously. Neither is it the spiritual. Right? We have three levels. We have physical, spiritual, and then we have elikus, godliness. It comes from elikus, from godliness, and it comes from the panemius of godliness, which is the Chabad, particularly the Chochmah. The Chochmah of the Eibishter is invested in the Torah. And that spring of Chochmah, the Mayim of Chochmah, which is the source of Torah, is compared to water. It's a wellspring. And it's nimtzichel Mayim, like water. Sheyordem b'makom geveya, which comes from a high place to a low place, mishakotsav la'il, as is written above. And that's today's time, basically telling us that, yet, although Maisa hu ha'ikar, right, Maisa is the main thing. The reason Maisa is the thing is because Maisa is an embodiment of the wisdom of Hashem, which is rooted in the Torah. And there are two things. One, you don't know what to do, of course, unless you learn the Torah. The Torah tells you what to do. That's the Shulchan Aruch. And number two, that which the Torah is telling us what to do, back to our midrash that I mentioned at the beginning, Al tircha halichas ela halachas. This is a midrash that I quote often because it's, I find it very important. It's a midrash that's quoted before Olenu, before the Kaddish, right before Olenu, that it says, Halichas olam loy. It's a pasuk. Halichas olam loy. The goings of the world belong to Hashem. And the midrash says, Al tircha halichas ela halachas. Don't read goings, read law, the halacha. The halacha expresses what God's will and wisdom is. And that's the Torah. And that's the mila of Torah, that it's the root of what God invests himself in, or to use a Marshall Hill, here it's the root, it's the wellspring of the water that flows down into the physical deeds. And therefore, from that perspective, the Torah has a mila over mitzvahs. Okay. Comment in Ubechen.
And we use our mind to study our flesh, which is the metaphor of everything.
Yeah. That's why we say Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. So today's lesson is really about the importance, and let's see if we can carve out more time than the time we've just carved out to enter into the Torah. Because it, right? Because the Torah is your life and the length of your days. Now here the days is your investment. You know, the 6 days of the creation, the 6 midos. In order to invest the midos into masa, it has to be driven by your preoccupation or your Isaac, your deep occupation in Torah. So that's certainly a bechein, to find more opportunities to, and we mentioned earlier, not we, the Alter Rebbe had mentioned earlier, it's important that this be done in a kaviyastic manner. This is a kaviyas, right? This is an amazing kaviyas. Every day we're doing this for half an hour. Find an opportunity to make, and maybe you already have, but if you can even include more kaviyas eating, more fixed times, even it's just a little bit, to get the mind immersed in Torah, because the mind is the source of the flow for everything we're going to be doing. That's a pretty powerful thing. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah. Rivka, is that you?
Yes.
Well, I got your hands up, and I think you.
My hands up, but somebody else got it. I don't
well, you got the hand up. Go ahead. And then we'll take the next one.
It. Okay, thank you. Let me put it down. So there's two. It seems like then there's two important aspects to Talmud Torah. Yep. One is per se by itself, just that time that you spend and that you're uniting your Chachma with the Chachma of Hashem, hopefully. And the other one is that it brings you to do them, that you have to know in order to do the physical actions, which I think is really the tachlis of the creation, is the physical actions. But in order to get there, you have to do the learning part too.
Maisa Huarikar, right.
There's a dual aspect. And I know in the Gemara, it concludes that, right? Talmud Torah connect Talmud, learning Torah is superior, but it's only superior because it brings to action. So it's it's conclusive and inconclusive at the same time.
Exactly, right. But it is conclusive, at least from 2 points of view. And the point of view right now, it's conclusive that Talmud Torah is the main thing. This is today's time.
If it brings to action, it on its own, it's not. I mean, you've got you've got people who learn Torah and don't do anything. That's not.
That's the other side of the coin.
Not it.
Right. It's two sides of the coin. One the Torah, and one the mitzvahs. And the greatness of Torah is that brings to mitzvahs. Yeah, it's a single coin with two sides. One side Torah, one side mitzvahs. Yehudas, you're up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This idea that the Beinanim can't transform the midos into holiness, is it? I think I learned once that can happen till Mashiach comes. Is that true?
That what can't happen till Mashiach comes?
That even though we're working on using our, transforming our whole lives, we're working on transforming our midos to holiness, are we not? Isn't that part of our avoda to...
Well, yes and no. I mean, the no part, we have to remember the first part of Tanya, where the Alter Rebbe gave us in the earlier chapters of Tanya, the definition, the difference between a tzaddik and a beinani, right? A beinani is within the realm of everybody's possibility because we're equipped with all the equipment we need to do it. And what is it that we can do if we achieve beinani status or have beinani moments? What we do is that we can suppress the negative from becoming latched onto in our thoughts. The hirur, the rumination, that's the way some people translate the word here, the rumination of the negativity does rise up to the brain of the Beinani, but the Beinani never takes a hold of it. So the Beinani, by definition, is not transforming. Then the Alter Rebbe goes on and says, now, if Hashem gives you extra strength, or you have an extra soul, or a soul from a higher level, you have a gift, you could become a tzaddik. And it's the tzaddik who does the transformation. And that's a now activity.
But it says in today's Tanya that it contrasts that with what it seems to be saying here is that yet with the Chabad we can't a Beinani can.
No.
Listen, let me just read you what it says in the commentary. It says.
On what line? What line is he commenting on?
It's commentary. It's right before Va'af in the beginning. Shemar. I can't read it. The letters are too small. It's right after the paragraph that says V'gam machutan va'atzmutan shel bechinos chochma bina v'das. Furthermore, the very substance and essence of Chabad.
The very substance of Chabad.
So it says here in the commentary, the Beinani is indeed incapable of transforming the mido to holiness. Chabad, however, can be transformed even by the Beinani.
Right, but it's the mido that can't be transformed. Therefore,
right. So that's what
you could change with that. No, we could change the way you think. That's the Chabad, right? You can change the way you think.
A Beinani can transform.
Not only can he, the Beinani must. This is the avoider. Right. He must.
That's my question. So a Beinani can do that. A Beinani will never can never transform the essence of the midos to holiness, but he can transform his chochma bina and das to holiness.
Absolutely.
That was the question. Okay.
And absolutely, and he must, and the whole Tanya is tools for doing that.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's why it's called Sefer Shel Beinani.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Menucha.
Yeah, I have a technical question of what you said in the beginning. Maybe you've discussed this, but the idea that the spheros come from the level of tohu, I think is what you said.
Well, there are spheros in tohu and spheros in tikkun. Yeah, but go ahead. Tohu predates tikkun, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. As far as I understand, the general Torah knowledge is that we have no idea what tohu vavohu means. You know, it comes up once, it never comes up again. And we talk about tohu dohu, but we have no idea what we're talking about. So how can suddenly we know?
Well,
that
I don't know where you
this?
got the idea that we have no idea that what we're talking about. There's
I
tons
don't
of
know. I've heard so many brilliant people say it, you know,
there's tons of
Okay, go ahead.
there's tons of Chassidus about tohu and bohu. Tons. I mean,
How do they know?
I just mean, how do they know? How do they know anything?
Yeah, I mean, in other words,
wait a minute. Hold on. Stop.
Okay,
That's
an
important.
Sorry.
That's a very important question. We don't know anything that we know in Torah has nothing to do with empirical evidence. Everything that our whole Torah, the Masorah, is a series of revelations. We know tohu and bohu. Remember the famous, I mean, I don't know famous, it was famous for my kids' line when my kids were little, the song, and he would not give us false hope, and he would not give us, this time about the Rebbe, and he would not tell us lies, and he would not say Mashiach's coming, had he not seen it with his eyes. So the souls of the tzaddikim have been informed in a chain of revelation that started from Adam HaRishon about what's going on. And that's how we know anything about what's going on in the supernal worlds.
Please don't understand me. I'm not talking about empirical evidence. I'm talking about the way we learn things. In other words, you know, something appears once, and that's the most important, and then it appears again, and then there's a contradiction, and then we all figure it out. You know, there's all the exegesis of learning things.
All right, exegesis largely applies to nigla exegesis. We're not doing really exegesis here. We're dealing with the Chachmas Nestorim, as is known, as is known to those who know the secret knowledge. As known to those, right? Chachma Nestores, these hidden wisdoms. There are those who know the hidden wisdoms and who explain to us what tohu is all about. I wish I had a better memory. It's one of the things that I have and don't have, to be able to quote you or point to exactly where sources in Hasidus, but you'll have to just take it on faith right now that there's a lot of Hasidus about tohu and bohu. To say we don't know anything about it is not true. Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
Maybe it's more like
what?
Not that we don't know anything about it, but that we don't know what it in itself really is. Perhaps that's maybe closer. I don't know.
Well, the Chassidus talks about the difference between the Sphiros and Tohu and the Sphiros and Tikkun. I mean, it talks about certainly a lot about the results of what's called Sphiros HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels, why it affected the Midos more than Chabad, which is a line that we used here today. But in any case, we can make a Viyasitim in those Maimorim which talk about Tohu v'Bohu, and we'll get a better handle on it. So I think we have concluded that it's really critical, maybe even critical to the life of the way we live in Torah and mitzvahs, that we make Viyasitim in Torah, because Torah is where we get the flow of what he called the waters that descend from the high place to the low place. And without it, number one, we don't know how to do the mitzvahs. Number two, we don't get the real feel that mitzvahs are agents of infusing the world with godliness. So, Viyasitim b'Torah was, I think, the big behind for today. Till we meet again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.